Hello to my favorite mathematicians, and welcome to lesson 25, session 2, where we are going to continue to develop our measurement conversions, and we're going to be working on converting larger units into smaller units. Now, a lot of measurements have to do with fractions and decimals because they are only a portion of a whole. So to refresh your memory with multiplying with some of the decimals, I would like you to look at these expressions. They all involve 1.5 being multiplied by something. And which of these expressions are equivalent to, so if you saw them, they are equal to 1,500. So I want you to decide which ones, when multiplied, are equivalent to 1,500 and explain. So I'd like you to experiment with this and try it on some scratch paper when you have finished and you figured out which expression is equivalent to 1,500. Go ahead and restart the video. Okay, we are looking at which expressions below are equivalent to 1,500 and explaining why. Well, it's been a while since we've multiplied with decimals. Luckily, these ones are all easier to multiply ones because these are all problems that have powers of 10. But it's been a while since we did that. So while they're easier in theory, it's been a while, which is why we have this to help refresh our memories. So if I have 1 5/10 multiplied by 10, well, I look at these two zeros, and I know that every time I multiply by 10, I get to move this decimal point over this way. Since 100 is the same as 10 times 10, and I can see that there's two zeros, that means I get to move this decimal point 2 places, which tells me that 1 5/10 times 100 is 150 because I moved my decimal point over 2 times. Is 150 equivalent to 1,500? No, it is not. So let's look at 1 5/10 times 3 to the power of 10. Again, it's been a while since we've used our exponents and our powers of 10. 10 to the power of 3 is not 30. It's not 10 times 3. It is 10 3 separate times. So 10 times 10 times 10. Each time we multiply by 10, we're moving this decimal point over another spot. So we're starting with 1 5/10, and we're moving it over 1 time, 2 times, and 3 times. Our decimal is now here, making our new number 1,500, which is exactly what we are looking for. So now let's look at 1 5/10 times 1,000. Each one of these zeros represents another 10. And every time we multiply by a 10, we would move our decimal point. I see 1, 2, 3 zeros, so we're moving it 1, 2, 3 times. And our decimal's now here. That has changed our 1.5 into 1,500. So it's 1 5/10 times 1,000 equivalent to 1,500? Yes, it is. So now we have 1 5/10 times 10 to the power of 2, which would be 10 times 10, which is the same as 100. There's 2 zeros, again, 2 zeros, which means this decimal is going to move 2 spots. 1, 2. That gives me 150. Is 150, my decimal's now here, equivalent to 1,500? No, it is not. Now here we have 1 5/10 times 10 times 10 times 10. Well, that tells me for each of these 10s, I'm moving my decimal point 1 spot over to the right. 1, 2, 3. Which changes my 1 5/10 to 1,500. And you probably noticed that 10 times 10 times 10 is the same as we had up here, 10 to the power of 3. So this one is also equivalent to 1,500. This is a skill we have not practiced in a while, so it's definitely a refresher if you didn't remember before when we started the warm-up. Hopefully some of it is coming back to you now that we've done it. So we're going to use some of that with our problems today. One of the reasons that we do converting larger numbers into smaller units is because these measurements are going to come up very often in real life. So here's an example. It says, in some parts of the world, travel distances on road signs and maps are given in kilometers. In the United States, it's typically done in miles. But in Europe, Canada, and a lot of other countries, distance signs and maps, the measurements are given in kilometers. How many meters are there in 3.5 kilometers if 1 kilometer is equal to 1,000 meters? So if you know 1 kilometer is equal to 1,000 meters, how many meters is there in 3 5/10 kilometers? So I would like you to pause the video now and go ahead and give this problem a try based off of what we've done in the past, as well as some of the work that we had just done in our warm-up. When you have tried it and you have an answer, go ahead and restart the video. Okay, in some parts of the world, travel distances on road signs and maps are given in kilometers. How many meters are there in 3 5/10 kilometers? And I broke it down that 1 kilometer is 1,000 meters. So 3 5/10 kilometers is how many meters? It's just what we're trying to figure out. Well, if we know that there's 1 kilometer is 1,000 meters, we're looking at 3 5/10 kilometers times that 1,000 meters that's in 1. So if 1,000 meters is in 1, we need that 3 5/10 times. So we have 1,000 times 3 5/10. Well, if you think back at the warm-up activity that we just did, we know that when we have something times 1,000, we see these 3 zeros, and we know that means we can move our decimal point those 3 spots. So 1, 2, 3. And the decimal point goes here. We fill these in with zeros. So that tells us that 3 5/10 kilometers is equal to 3,500 meters. So our question mark here is 3,500 meters. All right, so we're going to look at this same problem on the next page. And we're going to see another way that we can model it. So in some parts of the world, travel distances on road signs and maps are given in kilometers. How many meters are there in 3 5/10 kilometers when 1 kilometer is equal to 1,000 meters? You can use a table to help you understand this problem. I drew several tables yesterday when we were first introducing this. So here's another way. The table shows the relationship between meters and kilometers. Here's our kilometers. Here's our meters. If 1 kilometer is 1,000 meters, 2 kilometers would be 2,000 meters. 3 kilometers would be 3,000 meters. 4 kilometers is 4,000 meters. 5 kilometers is 5,000 meters. 6 kilometers is 6,000 meters. You also could look to say 5, if I wanted to know how many meters are in 5 kilometers, 5 times the 1,000 that each one has is 5,000. Because if there's 1,000 in 1 kilometer, there's 1,000, and then another 1,000, and a third 1,000, a fourth 1,000, and a fifth 1,000, which would give us 5,000. That's similar to what I did on the previous page. So we can definitely model it with the table. I know that models are very helpful for a lot of our students. Here's a way to solve it. You can use the information from the table to understand how to solve it. This only showed us our whole meters, and we had 3 5/10, or basically 3.5 kilometers. So the pattern on the table shows the number of meters is always 1,000 times the number of kilometers. So if there's 1 times 1,000, 2 times 1,000, 3 times 1,000, 4 times 1,000, 5 times 1,000, and 6 times 1,000. So here we would need 3.5, or 3 5/10 times 1,000 to continue the pattern, which, as we saw when we solved it before, gave us 3,500. You can also think about how, if this is 3.5, because 5/10 is a half, if you look at it as a fraction, and you have a pizza cut into 10 pieces, and you've eaten 5/10, you've eaten 1/2 of the pizza. 3,500 is halfway between 3,000 and 4,000, because half of 1,000 is 500. So to find the number of meters in 3 5/10 kilometers, you multiply 3 5/10 by 1,000. And we wrote our answer in the table. So now we're going to use the problem from the previous page to help us understand how to convert larger measurements, like kilometers, into smaller units or smaller measurement units, such as meters. So which is the smaller unit, meters or kilometers? Meters is our smaller unit. How do we know that? Well, we know that it takes 1,000 meters to make 1 kilometer, therefore meters have to be smaller. So how do we know? Because it takes 1,000 of the smaller meters to make 1 kilometer. So it has to be smaller. Oops. To make 1 kilometer. So, what operation do we use to convert from the larger measurement to the smaller measurement unit? Did we add, subtract, multiply, divide? So let's look. When we used to get it from the bigger one, the kilometers, to the smaller unit, did we add, subtract, multiply, or divide? Well, especially if we look here, we multiplied the kilometers times how many meters fit in each kilometer. So we multiplied. And when we multiplied, we found out that 3 5/10 kilometers is the same as 3,500 meters. Now, number 4 asks us to use what we learned about the relationship between meters and kilometers to complete the table below. Some of it's filled out for us. Here's 1 meter, and we know that 1 meter is equal to 1,000 kilometers. And I want you to pause the video and try your best to fill in the blanks based on the number of kilometers and knowing how 1 kilometer is 1,000 meters, and how we multiplied when we were looking at the kilometers to find how many meters. Use that information to try to fill in the chart. When you have finished and your table is complete, restart the video. Okay, with number 4, we were asked to use what we have learned about the relationship between meters and kilometers to complete the table below. And if we knew that we used multiplication to make the larger measurement, which kilometers are the larger measurement, and convert it to the smaller measurement unit, we use multiplication. We use 1 multiplied by 1,000 gets us 1,000. If we have 2 kilometers multiplied by 1,000, we got 2,000. If we had 3 kilometers multiplied by 1,000, we had 3,000. So we know that our pattern means we need to take each of these numbers and multiply them by 1,000. So first, let's look at the 8/10. That means we need to take 8/10 times 1,000. So when we look at number 1,000, we see there's 1, 2, 3 zeros, which means we need to take this decimal place, or this decimal point, and move it 1, 2, 3 places to the right. So let's do that. 1, 2, 3. Here's our new decimal place. Fill in the rest with zeros. So how many meters are in 8/10 of a kilometer? There is 800 meters. Now let's look at 1 85/100. We know there'll be more than 1,000 kilometers because this is 1 kilometer is 1,000. This is 1 85/100. So we know it will be more than 1,000. And we know that we're using multiplication to convert it. So for every 1 kilometer is 1,000. So we're going to multiply by 1,000. And again, there's 3 zeros. So we're going to move it over 3 spots. 1, 2, 3. Our decimal place is now here. Our decimal point is now here. Fill in the space with a 0, and our new number is 1,850. So there's 1,850 meters in 1 85/100 kilometers. All right, let's try our last one. We have 2 3/100 kilometers. How many meters are in that? Well, we know we need to multiply by 1,000 meters. Because for every 1 kilometer is 1,000. So if 2 kilometers was 2,000, we need to apply the same pattern and multiply by 1,000. I see these 3 zeros, which means I'm going to be moving my decimal point 3 places to the right. 1, 2, 3. My decimal point now goes here. I fill in that extra space with a 0, and I know that there are 2,030 meters in 2 3/100 kilometers. So if we take this pattern that we've recognized, and if 1 kilometer has 1,000, and for each kilometer we're looking at, we need to multiply by 1,000 to convert it to meters. How many meters are in K, so an unknown number of kilometers? Well, we know that there would be 1,000 for 1, and K is our unknown number, so we know there would be 1,000 times the number of K, whatever K stands for, kilometers, which would be the same as 1,000 times K. All right, now I'd like to look at number 6. There are 3 feet in 1 yard. Explain how you decide whether to multiply or divide by 3 if you are converting from yards to feet. So I want you to think about that. When you found your answer, go ahead and restart the video. All right, number 6 says there's 3 feet in 1 yard. Explain how you decide whether to multiply or divide by 3 if you need to convert from yards to feet. So if we had our table similar to this one, and we have yards, and we have feet, and we know there's 1 yard is 3 feet. So we're trying to figure out how many feet there are on the yard. Would we multiply or divide? We would multiply, and the reason why is because feet are the smaller measurement unit. There's more feet in 1 yard than there are yards in 1 yard. So they are the smaller measurement unit. And so when we're converting from the smaller unit to the bigger one, we have to multiply. So because feet are the smaller measurement unit, we multiply to determine the number of feet that would go in each yard. So if 3 feet goes in 1 yard, we would multiply 2 times the 3 to get 6. And if there's 3 yards times 3 feet in each yard, then there would be 9. So because feet are the smaller unit, we multiply to find how many feet are in each yard. So first, number 7, it asks us to reflect and look back at our try it, the strategies that we tried, the model it, and the solve it. So we have the way that you tried it, the way it modeled using a table, and in the solve it where we use the information from the table to try to determine where it would fit in our table with using multiplication. And I would like you to write what works best for you, which models or strategies do you like best for converting larger units, like kilometers, into smaller units, like meters. So go ahead, pause the video, and write your answer. I would love for it if you also put in the comment section of the video your answer as to what method seems to work best for you. When you've finished, go ahead and restart the video. Okay, now that you have reflected and determined which strategy works best for you, we are going to go ahead and apply that strategy to some new problems. So use what you've just learned to solve the following problems. How many ounces are there in 4 1/2 pounds? And show your work here. And it reminds us there's 16 ounces in 1 pound. So I would like you to pause the video, reread through the problem, and solve it. Once you have a solution, go ahead and restart the video. Right. How many ounces are there in 4 1/2 pounds? And it reminds us that there are 16 ounces in 1 pound. So if we have 4 1/2 pounds, it might be easiest to look at the 4 pounds and the 1/2 pound. So if I have 4 pounds and there's 16 ounces in each pound, I'm going to need to multiply 4 times 16. So 16 times 4. 4 times 6 is 24. 4 times 2 is 4. 4 times 1 is 4 plus 2 more is 6. So I know that right here I have 64 ounces. But I'm not finished. I still have my 1/2 pound. Well, if there is 16 ounces in 1 pound, how many ounces would be in 1/2 pound? So I need to look at what is 1/2 of 16. So I have my 1 pound and it's 16 ounces. There we go. We have our 16 ounces and I'm going to divide it in half. There's 8 there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I may have drawn a little bit too much. There we go. So there's 8 here and 8 here. So each 1/2 pound has 8. So I know there's 8 ounces in 1/2 pound. So here I have my 4 pounds, or my 4 pounds, yes, and my 1/2 pound. So I need to add those together because I had 4 1/2 pounds. 64 plus the 8 ounces, so 64 ounces for 4 pounds, 8 ounces for 1/2 pound. 8 plus 4 is 12. 6 plus 1 is 7. So altogether in 4 1/2 pounds, I have 72 ounces. Okay, question 9 asks us how many millimeters are there in 9 25/100 centimeters, and to show our work. For each centimeter is equal to 10 millimeters. So each small centimeter is broken up into 10 individual pieces, each of which is a millimeter. So how many millimeters are there in 9 and 25 hundredths centimeters. So go ahead, pause the video, solve it, make sure you show your work. When you have a solution, start the video again. Okay, it's asking us how many millimeters are there in 9 and 25 hundredths centimeters. So I have 9 and 25 hundredths centimeters, and it tells me that for each centimeter, there's 10 millimeters. So for each of these centimeters, I need to multiply it by 10 millimeters. So I have 9 and 25 hundredths times 10. Well, as we just did on the previous pages, when we multiply by 10 or a power of 10, look at the zeros, because each zero represents a 10. And we know to move the decimal point that many places to the right. So if there's 1 0, I'm going to move it 1 spot to the right to here, which would give my new number of 92 and 5/10. So when it asks how many millimeters are there in 9 and 25 hundredths centimeters, there are 92 and 5/10 millimeters. All right, let's look at number 10. 10 says, Ravi's fish tank can hold 65 liters of water. How many milliliters of water can the fish tank hold? And it reminds us that 1 liter is 1,000 milliliters. So I want you to pause the video, reread the problem, solve it, and then circle which one of these answers is the correct one. Right. Ravi's fish tank can hold 65 liters of water. How many milliliters of water can the fish tank hold? 1 liter is equal to 1,000 milliliters. Well, if 1 liter is equal to 1,000 milliliters, we know it can hold 65 liters. So we're going to need to multiply 1,000 milliliters for each liter. If there's 65 liters, we need to multiply 65 times 1,000. When we multiply times 1,000, we recognize that's a power of 10. And there's 3 zeros here, which means we need to move our decimal point 3 places to the right. So 65. And as a whole number, that means our decimal point is here. And we move it 3 places to the right. 1, 2, 3. Our new decimal goes here. We fill in the open spots with zeros. And our new number is 65,000. So how many milliliters of water can the fish tank hold? It can hold 65,000 milliliters, which is D. All right. Let's move on to some of our practice pages. We are going to practice converting larger units into smaller units. So we're going to study this example below, showing how to convert between meters and millimeters, and then we're going to solve problems 1 through 10. So it asks, how many millimeters are in 2 and 52 hundredths meters? The table below shows the relationship between meters and millimeters. So it has 1 meter, 2 meters, 3 meters, 4 meters, 5 meters. This shows us that for each meter, there's 1,000 millimeters. So 2 meters has 2,000 millimeters. 3 meters has 3,000 millimeters, 4 meters has 4,000 millimeters, and 5 meters has 5,000 millimeters. So to find the number in 2 and 52 hundredths meters, we would do it by multiplying 2 and 52 hundredths by 1,000. 2 and 52 hundredths times 1,000. I see 3 zeros, so they move the decimal point over 3 places, which gives them 2,520. So there's 2,520 meters in 2 and 52 hundredths meters. So it asks us, which is the larger unit, meters or millimeters? Well, we know that milliliters are small because 1,000 of them fits into 1 meter. So the larger unit is the meter, which means the smaller unit is the millimeter. So how can you find how many millimeters are in 4 and 6 hundredths meters? So I'd like you to look at the example and use that and apply it to answering this question. So go ahead and pause the video, and once you have an answer, go ahead and restart it. Number 2 asks, how can you find how many millimeters are in 4 600 meters? Well, we can find that if there's 4 600 meters, there's 1,000 millimeters in 1 meter. So in 4 600 meters, we're going to multiply that times the 1,000 there is in each meter. So I see this as a power of 10, and I know I'm going to move this decimal point over 3 times. So if here's my original, and I move it over 1, 2, 3 times. My new decimal point's here. I add this, and my new number is 4,060. So number 3 asks, how many millimeters are there in 4 600 meters? There are 4,060. Now number 4 asks us to fill in the missing information in the table. Here's our number of meters. And here is our base that there is 1 meter has 1,000 millimeters, and it reminds us 2 meters is 2,000 millimeters, 3 meters is 3,000 millimeters, and 4 meters is 4,000 millimeters. So I'd like you to pause the video and determine what we need to complete the table. When you've finished the table, go ahead and restart the video. Okay, number 4 asks us to fill in the missing information on the table. By this point, you recognize that we are multiplying 1,000 to each of these meter distances to determine how many millimeters there are for those meters. And every time we multiply by 1,000, we're moving the decimal point over 3 places because these are a power of 3. So if I'm looking at 34 hundredths, I'm going to move my decimal place over 1, 2, 3, and my 0 is there. So there is 340 millimeters in 34 hundredths meters. Now, in 1 5/10 meters, if I do the same process, 1, 2, 3, fill in my spaces with zeros, I know that there's 1,500 millimeters in 1 5/10 meters. Now let's look at 2 900 meters. I'm going to repeat the process. I'm going to take 2 9/10, multiply it by 1,000, and to do that I can move the decimal place over 1, 2, 3 times. My new decimal point goes here. And my new number is 2,090. There's 2,090 millimeters in 2 900 meters. So our final one, we have 3 77 meters. To convert that into millimeters, we're going to multiply by 1,000 because for each meter there's 1,000. So for 3 77 meter times 1,000. We move our decimal point over 3 times, 1, 2, 3, and place it here. We fill in our open spots with zeros, and we now have 3,770 millimeters in 3 77 meters. So number 5 asks us, what operation do you use to convert the larger measurement into a smaller unit of measurement? And we said we used multiplication. But it also asks us to explain why. Well, the reason that we're using multiplication is because it takes more of the smaller unit to be the same amount as the larger unit. So we are adding and repeat adding more, 1,000, 1,000 plus 1,000, 1,000 plus another 1,000. It's easier to multiply. So we multiply because it takes more of the smaller unit to equal the same amount of the larger unit. So we're using multiplication because it takes more of the smaller unit equal the same amount. Of the larger unit. Once you have that written, we can go ahead to the next page. If you need more time, feel free to pause the video and restart it when you're ready. All right, the pattern in the table shows that the number of centimeters is always 100 times the number of meters. So fill in the missing number of centimeters. We can see the pattern, 1 to 100. For 2 meters, there's 200 centimeters. And for 1 and 5/10, if we have our 100 and we moved it over 1, 2, because there's 2 zeros here, we can see that there's 150. So now that we know, we're taking this and multiplying it by 100 because it shows that the number of centimeters is always 100 times the number of meters. So we'll want to take the number of meters times 100 and use that to continue the pattern and fill in the missing number of centimeters. So go ahead and pause the video and fill in these last remaining spots to make our table complete. Okay, the pattern in the table for problem 6 shows that the number of centimeters is always 100 times the number of meters. So we're going to use that information to fill in the missing number of centimeters. So when we're multiplying times 100, we're recognizing 100 is a power of 10. And there's 2 zeros, which means we're going to be moving our decimal over 2 places to the right. So we're going to look at 2 and 7/100ths, and we're going to move our decimal point over 2 places to the right, 1, 2, and place it here. That will give us 207 centimeters. 2 and 7/10 meters is 207 centimeters. 3 meters times 100 would give us 300 centimeters. 3 and 26/100ths, if we move the decimal over 2 places, gives us 326 centimeters. And 4 meters, 4 times 100 is going to give us 400 and tell us that there's 400 centimeters in 4 meters. Number 7 says a football player runs 13½ yards. How many feet does he run? And to show your work. And it reminds us that 1 yard is 1 yard is 3 feet. So we went 13½ yards. So I want you to pause the video, give this one a try. When you have your solution, go ahead and restart it. Okay, a football player runs for 13½ yards. How many feet does he run? 1 yard equals 3 feet. So I'm going to kind of separate this for right now. There's 13, and here's my 1/2. And I'll bring them back together afterwards because 13½ is the same as 13 plus 1/2. So I'm going to look at how many feet there are in 13 yards and how many feet there is in ½ a yard. So if 1 yard has 3 feet, 13 yards would have 13 for the yards times 3 of those feet. And we would do the same thing here. We were going to have 1/2 times those 3 feet. So 13 times 3, let's go ahead and solve it here. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times 1 is 3. So we know that this here is the same as 39 feet. So 13 yards is the same as 39 feet. Now let's look at this ½ of a yard. Well, we have 1/2 times 3. Well, we've done a lot with fractions lately. We know how to solve this. We have 1/2 times 3. Anytime you have a whole number, you can put it over a 1 to convert it into a fraction. So we have our numerators. We have our denominators. 1 times 3 is 3. 2 times 1 is 1. Oh, I mean 2 times 1 is 2. So we have 3/2. Well, 3/2 feet doesn't quite work because that's an improper fraction. So I'm going to convert that into a mixed number. And I'm going to see how many times does 2 go into 3. If I divide it, 2 goes into 3 1 time. If I subtract it, I have 1 left over. So there's my remainder and my denominator. So 3/2 of a foot is the same as 1 1/2 feet. So now I need to bring my 39 feet together with my 1 1/2 feet. And that's going to give me 39 plus 1 is going to give me 40 and 1/2 feet. So the football player runs for 3.5 yards. How many feet does he run? He runs 40 1/2 feet, which is equivalent to 3.5 yards. All right, let's look at number 8. There are 24 hours in a day. If you want to convert days to hours, should you multiply or divide by 24? This is very similar to problem number 5 that we solved on the previous page. So I want you to go ahead, pause the video, think about your answer, refer back to number 5 if need be to help support your answer. When you have an answer, go ahead and start it. Okay, there are 24 hours in a day. If you want to convert days into hours, should you multiply or divide by 24? Well, we are going to multiply. And our explanation, if there is 24 hours equals 1 day, and we want to find out maybe how many there are in 2 days, we're going to multiply our 2 times the 24 because the 24 is the smaller unit. There is more hours in 1 day than there is days in 1 day. So we're going to multiply because hours is the smaller unit, or is a smaller unit. It's a smaller unit than days. So to convert from days to hours, you would multiply. So now that we know that we would multiply to convert from days to hours, looking at that information, how many hours are there in 2.5 days? So you're going to convert your days into hours. So I want you to pause the video, solve this problem, make sure you show your work. When you have your solution, you can restart it. Okay, using what we know from problem 8, and that when we are converting from days to hours, we would multiply. How many hours are there in 2.5 days? So we are going from days to hours. And we learned from problem 8 that when you're converting from days to hours, you're going to multiply. How many days do we have? We have 2.5 days. And if we're multiplying to convert it, we know we're going to multiply. And how many hours are in 1 day? There is 24. So our problem is 2 1/2 times 24. So let's break this up again, and we have 2 times 24. And we have our 1/2 times 24. If we do 2 times 24, 2 times 4 is 8. 2 times 2 is 4. So for this part, we have 48 hours. But we still need to add it to this half of a day. So if I look at it and I think, well, how much is half of a day? How much is half of 24? And I immediately know that that's 12. But if I wasn't quite sure and I wanted to check it, I could multiply the fractions out, placing my whole number over a 1. I have 24. And then I have 2 times 1. 1 times 24 is 24. 2 times 1 is 2. I have my improper fraction, which means I need to divide to convert it. Drop the 4. 2 goes into 4 2 times. 2 times 2 is 4. So I do have my 12. So here's for my 2 days and for my half day. Let's add those together. 8 plus 2 is 10. 1 plus 4 is 5, plus 1 more is 6. So when I add my hours for 2 days and my hours for half a day, I get 60 hours. Multiplying 2.5 days times 24 hours in 1 day tells me that there are 60 hours in 2 1/2 days. Okay, on to our final problem. 16 ounces is equivalent to 1 pound. A lion cub born at the zoo weighs 2 1/2 pounds. How many ounces does the lion cub weigh? And show your work. So go ahead, pause the video, reread the problem, solve it, make sure you show your work, and when you have a solution, restart the video. Okay, problem 10 tells us 16 ounces is equivalent to 1 pound. A lion cub born at the zoo weighs 2 1/2 pounds. How many ounces does the lion cub weigh? Well, if there's 16 ounces is 1 pound, and we know that it's 2 1/2 pounds, we need to figure out how many ounces. So we need to take our 2 1/2 times our number of ounces. So I'm going to divide this up to 2 times 16. That should be 2 1/2, not 2 1/6. There we go. And my 1/2 times 16. So over here, my 2 times 16, or 16 times 2, 2 times 6 is 12. 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 more is 3. So far I have 32 ounces. Now look over here. 1/2 times 16. Well, I know that half of 16 is 8 ounces. So I have my 32 ounces from my 2 pounds, plus my 8 ounces from 1/2 pound. I'm going to take my 32 plus 8. 32 plus 8. 8 plus 2 is 10. 3 and 1 more is 40. So I have, if a lion cub is born and it weighs 2 1/2 pounds, how many ounces is it? It is 40 ounces. All right, nice job. We did a lot of converting large units into smaller units. So job well done today. Tomorrow we will be moving on and converting smaller units into large units.